Hi, welcome to week 2 presentation. Here is talk through the charts that we had for this week, which is not a lot. I mean, what I want to do really with the discussion on the ITIL is just literally kind of go through the book. It describes it pretty well. I'll draw out some of the key elements here in this presentation real quick, but I'm not even going to read all this. But what you really need to understand about ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. All right, so this is not a page turner, but it is important in that we understand what the library is, what it isn't, and how we can leverage what we learn from it to better articulate what we're trying to accomplish within our information systems and our information services, and be able to communicate with other organizations in a way that'll sort of make for a seamless integration with the various functions that will support the business. The goal behind ITIL is really to calibrate our department to function better with the needs of the business and really support the needs of the business. It's structured around the business and what we need to do with our information flow to better support the goals of the business. So essentially it's a library, universally applicable guidelines, best practices, those kinds of things. But it's not going to mandate. I mean, it doesn't tell you what you have to do, but what it does is allow you to understand what's a good system and a good approach for accomplishing setting up an IT system and an IT architecture. Now, there is also this notion of the information technology service management, which is basically how you implement all these things, the implementation and management of IT and services to meet the needs of the business. So that is more of a broader kind of view. So not all of service management is going to be based on ITIL, but ITIL is essentially service management. So if you look at how we're describing the library, that's what we're trying to accomplish. It's the application of all of these information technology services towards the needs of the business. If you look at this, the way we've structured this out, and this is in your book as well, there's this sort of focus right in the middle there on the service strategy. What are we trying to accomplish by managing the information for the business? And around that, you've got these three sort of pillars that are steering this thing and keeping it moving. You've got your service design, right? Executing all that, transitioning to services, and then the service operation of the services themselves. And then on the outside of that, you've got this sort of continual improvement effort that goes on. And the idea here is that you're looking at what needs to be accomplished with the business. How do we get that implemented and executed effectively? And then how are we sort of monitoring that on an ongoing basis? So as the business changes, which any good business is going to evolve, and through sense and respond become more attuned to its customer market, the information technology flows have to be evolving as well. And this is one of the traps we can fall into in IT, and that's what this ITIL tries to get us away from that trap and really focus on making sure we're mapped with the business as the business changes itself. So it's a means of providing value to the customer and facilitate those outcomes without incurring huge ownership costs and risk. So if we break it down into some of the key components, you got a service strategy. And what that looks at is really what are the patterns of business activities. They'll call them PBAs, and the book will continue to defer these acronyms. You got to kind of keep them in the back of your head. Patterns of business activity means, basically what does the business do? How does the business operate? And so, what do we need to do from an information flow perspective to map into that? Your key performance indicators for that you're going to map to on the strategy are going to be, the number of planned services, number of unplanned services, new strategic initiatives that you're supporting, new customers, number of lost customers. Those are the things that you're going to be looking at from a metrics perspective to see how well we're doing in terms of the overall, strategy to provide service to the business. Each one of these different areas is going to have KPIs associated with it. As you read the book, you see that. And what we're trying to do with that development of KPIs is to say, look, this isn't just stuff you read and forget about. How are we actually tracking and measuring metrics towards our implementation and operation of technology in order to make sure that we're being effective for the business? Portfolio management is the next area that we look at. Here we're talking about defining and analyzing new and changed services, proving new and changed services, doing those portfolio reviews. From a service perspective, what are the groups of things that we're trying to accomplish for the business? Financial management of IT, another area that ITIL will talk about. We'll look into budgeting, accounting, charging. How do we charge IT back to the business? How do we keep track of that? And the KPIs you're looking at here is adherence to the process, cost-benefit analysis, making sure we're not doing things that are getting out of control or doing things because they sound good but really can't be supported from a business perspective. These are the kinds of things that we're looking at here. It's key to good demand management. To be able to understand the financial aspect of your information technology and how that relates to how the business needs to be supported. Analytics, a lot of times, so we talk about analytics, that can support a lot of that. So a lot of big data coming in around our implementation of IT and services that we can look to see how effectively we're accomplishing what the business needs us to do. Business relationship, so now we step back and say, all right, not just our relationship to the business in terms of how we're providing services to our internal customers, but how is that impacting the business as a whole? Maintaining those customer relationships, identifying service requests that we can provide to outside customers, signing up customers to some standard services that we can provide through the business and support in that way. Here your KPIs are more like customer oriented, right? You're looking at customer complaints, number that you've accepted, number that maybe you don't. Return satisfaction surveys, customer satisfaction, that kind of thing. Service design then is, how do we get into the coordination of all of this? How do we ensure that the most relevant resources that we have from an IT department are going to be available to design the services that they support across the enterprise? And the more efficient a business is, the more challenging this kind of thing can become, because what you look at from an efficiency standpoint and your functional excellence standpoint is going to sometimes come in conflict. If we get a good set of processes, the first thing we want to do is make those processes as efficient as possible. But that also means if we're totally efficient, then we don't have any room to look out and say, from a sense and response standpoint, what's changing in the business. So service design is a key element that we don't want to lose sight of, to say, are we putting the right resources in to make sure that we're meeting the new and most relevant aspects of the business as it goes forward. And there's the catalog itself. So a service portfolio includes all the services included, including those that are retired. But a catalog means you're only going to include those which people can request now. So how are we managing that catalog and making sure it's available? So as people need information, they have a means to go and get it. And then service level management, this is your agreement. So if you're not providing a specific tangible outcome for a specific tangible request, you've got some sort of service level agreement then inside that says basically between the IT department and whoever's using it, you've got some service level agreements that I'm going to have a certain amount of time allocated. We're going to respond within a certain amount of time. We're going to give a certain number of resources. That agreement will be mapped to and between the customer, the internal customer, and the IT department. And it'll give you some sort of structure around which you can baseline your staffing and around which you can baseline the level of support and baseline the amount of resources that's necessary to execute what is perceived to be the level of information technology support that the business needs right now. So those SLAs are important as the sort of the ground floor for supporting the business. There's also OLA, which is operations level agreements between two support organizations. So, we may have agreement with another organization to accomplish part of this. We'll do a third part, and that's where the OLA comes in. And then the UCs, if you've got third-party support, you do those. So the book talks about those. I would understand those. Your KPIs along these areas are going to be, the same kinds of things. Number of services that are covered by an SLA. The more you can do that, generally, I think the better, because, again, it gives you some sort of a grounding in terms of the overall size and scope of the information technology operation that you got to put into place. There are other key management processes that I'm not going to go into in this presentation, but you should take a look at them, obviously, in the book. Risk management's a key one. It tends to get overlooked a lot, but risk being, from an information technology perspective, the biggest driver of cost is risk. So understanding risk and managing that and bringing that down is a key level of our processes that ITIL makes a point to go and go into some detail on. Capacity management means how many resources do we need to be able to throw at any particular problem as it comes through? And do we have the means to do that? So capacity, when we talk about SLAs and service level agreements, a lot of that is going to bound what the overall capacity is of the business and with the IT department supporting it. Availability management in terms of the systems and the networks that you're providing, information security, supplier management, and more going on. Event management, I think of all these, event management is a key element. As opposed to service design. In event management, what you're really responding to events from an operational perspective. So how you structure the overall maturity and your ability to respond, as we've been talking about, to the evolution of the business and to these problems that'll pop up that you can't always predict for. That needs to reflect accepted practices and principles, and this is what the ITIL will go into for you. So summary, I'm not, you go ahead and read the book, get the points out of this thing. It gives you an outline of some of the best practices within information technology, and it also gives you that vocabulary, that allow you and other IT professionals to communicate, to work through, collaborate, and evolve this as a profession. And in addition, as you're trying to build out your capability and establish your department and what you're trying to do with your information technology flows, from a contracts perspective, from a supplier perspective, not only is it giving you best practices, but it's giving you the ability to sort of flesh that out in a way that makes sense for the business and for those that are depending on you from a department standpoint to make sure we get the right stuff in place and we don't leave anything behind that will potentially cause a problem for the business down the road. So that's it.